So I think it's important to understand who created the Heritage Foundation, which is the think tank that created the manifesto of Project 2025. And so there are three founding members of the Heritage Foundation that was created in the late 70s. And when you learn something about these three guys, you start to see how their thoughts and their ideologies are still very much um, interweaved throughout the document and how they still function as an organization today. So the first member, which was also the individual who put up the dough to get the Heritage Foundation up and running, is Joesph Coors. So Joesph Coors is one of three of the founding members of the Heritage Foundation. He is the grandson of Adolf Coors, a German immigrant who illegally entered America by stowing away on a ship in the late 1800s, like in 1868, just fresh out of slavery. And he founded the Coors Brewing Company. So I mean, I think it's interesting that one of the founding members of the Coors Brewing Company and the great grandfather of a founding member of the Heritage Foundation is an illegal immigrant. I guess he's living that American dream. So Joseph, he helped finance Ronald Reagan's political career as governor of California and as the president of the United States. So, the Coors Corporation and family has had their footprint in government for years, even prior to Ronald Reagan. And one thing that has remained consistent over the decades is that they are anti union and they are anti environment. And for years, from the 70s into current day, they have had numerous strikes and um, boycotts against the company that has led to a significant decrease in their market share, which it's proof that boycotting and strikes do work. But they have been sued for discriminatory practices against Blacks, against Mexicans, against gays, against women. They are anti-union. So if you are voting for a president who is in line with the policies in Project 2025, then you are voting against your best interests. Moving on, in addition to being anti-union, they are anti-environment. And so they have been fined, the Coors Corporation, numerous times, at least uh, let me see, I have it documented here somewhere. They have been fined over 31 times for dumping hazardous waste products. They have been fined for killing 7 miles of, or contaminating 7 miles of the Clear Creek, which killed all the fish in the water. And so there was regulation put into place to prevent them from causing further contamination because they also were dumping toxic waste into their neighboring states from their aluminum cans. And so what they did is that they created a legal foundation to fight against restrictions that were being put in place to protect the environment. And lo and behold, the person that they got to head up this foundation, this legal foundation, this anti-environmentalist foundation, was James Watt. He was later hired as the U.S. Secretary of Interior. And so the U.S. Secretary of Interior job is specifically to protect the national parks, to protect wildlife, to protect natural resources. So how can a lawyer who comes from an anti-environmentalist foundation be hired to head up the U.S. Secretary of the Interior? Um, I think that says a lot about the insidious nature of what happens, and when you have close government ties with private corporations that are feeding money into your campaigns. And so James Watt, who's famous for saying, if the troubles from the environmentalists cannot be solved in the jury box or in the ballot box, then perhaps the cartridge box should be used. So if we can't settle our differences by changing the law or by voting and align with how they believe they should run their business, then we should use guns. That's basically what that statement says. So James also was responsible for hiring the person who would head up the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and he hired this woman right here. Wait, it's not moving. Here we go. Anne Gorsuch. And if that name sounds familiar, I'll tell you why in a minute. So Anne had a scandal during her tenure, very short one, 2 years, as head of the Environmental Protection Agency, which is their job is to protect human health and the environment. That is what they do. Anne is an anti-environmentalist. So why was she chosen to head up this agency when all she did was get rid of waste disposal laws? And so her biggest scandal was the handling of something called the Superfund back in the 80s. So the Superfund was created during the Jimmy Carter administration. And the job of the Superfund is to clean up hazardous waste sites. So Anne was being accused of mismanaging the program, delaying cleanups, and showing favoritism to certain polluting industries. And so Congress pulled her in and they're like, we need you to provide documentation. They subpoenaed documentation for over 160 separate hazardous waste sites that she was responsible for the cleanup of. She refused to turn in documentation. So she was held in contempt, and of course, she resigned from her position. But this is all important because this individual who headed up the Coors Foundation, this is how he runs his company, and this is how they want to run the country. So it's important to know the values of this organization who has created this document. And so that's Joesph Coors. That's founder number one. We have two more to go through. So stay tuned next. Real quick, Anne Gorsuch. The reason why that name sounds familiar that I'm slaughtering is because her son is Neil Gorsuch, the United States Supreme Court justice that was nominated into his position by no other than Donald Trump. Insidious, I tell you, insidious.